everyone, it's Catherine Chahar here again, and today for our training we are going to be looking at measurements in lower key stage 2. So let's start off by looking at year 3. So in year 3, children will be able to add and subtract measurements. You need to be able to tell the time to the nearest minute, as well as comparing durations of time. So you can see already how it's built upon year 1 and year 2 learning. So we're going to be measuring and adding to find perimeter of 2D shapes. We'll be telling the time using 12 and 24-hour clocks, including Roman numerals for numbers, as well as adding and subtracting amounts of money to give change. So let's have a look at adding and subtracting measurements. So we'll start off by children need to be able to compare mixed units. So for example, kilograms and grams. So we can see that 1 kilogram is greater than 200 grams. It is heavier, there is more of it. We can look at simple equivalents of mixed units. So for example, 5 meters is equivalent to 500 centimeters. As well as adding and subtracting measures, recording calculations using appropriate units. So we'll be using the same addition and subtraction methods that you would use, but making sure that the appropriate units are recorded, like in the example here. This time we're going to be looking at perimeter in terms of measuring shape. So the perimeter is the total distance around the outside of a 2D shape. And to find a perimeter of any shape with straight sides, all we need to do is simply add together the length of all the sides. So for example, if we look at the triangle, we know that each side there is an equilateral triangle. Each side is 5 centimetres, therefore the perimeter would be 15 centimetres. Looking at the rectangle example at the bottom, we can measure that 2 sides are 12 centimetres, 2 sides are 8 centimetres, so we add that all together and we write that as 40 centimetres. Now it's important that we use the correct unit and that we include that in our answer. So if the measurement is in centimetres, our answer needs to be included in centimetres as well. Looking at time, we now need to make sure that children are aware of the difference between analogue and digital time. So analogue is, for example, on the round clock face that you can see there, and digital time is on the digital clock underneath. Children now need to be able to tell the time to the nearest minute. They need to be able to record and compare time in terms of seconds, minutes and hours. So we need to be looking at, for example, which time is later, 3:02 p.m. or 8:58 a.m. We need to be able to use appropriate vocabulary such as o'clock, a.m, p.m, morning, afternoon, noon and midnight. So this is vocabulary that children are used to, they have seen in previous year groups, but it's just reaffirming and building upon it each time. Children need to be concrete with the number of days in a year and the number of days in each month. So we've got to remember that there are 365 days in a year except 366 in a leap year. And remembering that that's where we add the extra day is in February when we give it 29 days. But it's important that children are aware of the number of days in each month. Looking at time now, a bit more detail, we're going to be looking at 12 and 24 hour. So this is where children need to be able to understand, read, recognise and convert the difference between 12-hour clocks and 24-hour clocks. So the simple answer is, in a 24-hour clock, we start at 0, meaning midnight, and build up all the way to 23, meaning 11. And we do not use AM or PM. But for a 12-hour clock, we simply use the digit 0 to 12 and we put an AM for the morning and a PM for the afternoon. Looking at Roman numerals, children need to be aware of the numbers of 1 to 12 and how they would look in a clock. Mainly in an analogue clock, as you would very rarely see Roman numerals in a digital clock. So it's just having that understanding of what the numbers represent and where they would be seen on a clock face. Looking now at year 4. So in year 4, children will be expected to convert between some units of measurement, such as kilometres to metres, as well as be able to calculate measurements in relations to different shapes. So we'll be looking at working out the perimeter and area of rectilinear shapes, solving problems including converting units of time, as well as adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing measurements, including money. So we're looking at converting measurements here. So we've got some key vocabulary here on the left hand side for weights and mass and capacity and length. And these I have circled the most important ones for us to remember. So converting mass, it's important that we know that 1,000 grams is equivalent to 1 kilogram. Kilo meaning 1,000, so that's an easy way for us to remember it on there. So when we're converting between kilograms and grams, if we want to convert kilos to grams, we multiply it by 1,000. And if we want to convert grams to kilograms, we divide by 1,000. Looking at capacity, we know that 1,000 millilitres is a litre. So it's the same method of conversion. Litres to millilitres, we multiply by 1,000. Millilitres to litres, we divide by 1,000. And then looking at converting length. So it's really important that we know that 1 kilometre is 100 metres. We know that 100 centimetres is equivalent to 1 metre. And that 10 millimetres is equivalent to 1 centimetre. So you can see how the units build up. So 1 centimetre is 10 millimetres. 1 metre is 100 centimetres. And 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres. Looking a little bit more detail at time, we're now going to be converting time. So it's important that children know the equivalents. So they need to know there's 1 minute is worth 60 seconds, an hour is 60 minutes, a day is 24 hours, a week is 7 days, a fortnight is 2 weeks. We already know that children are solid in the number of days in each month. Talking about years, so we know that a year is 12 months, 365 days and 52 weeks. Talk about a leap year, having an extra day in February, and then looking at centuries, decades and millenniums. So a decade is 10 years, century is 100 and millennium is 1,000. Now it's really important that children don't get confused by thinking a millennium is 1,000,000 years. It's important that we teach that it is 1,000. Looking at perimeter now and area of rectilinear shapes. Now a rectilinear shape is simply a shape that's got straight sides. So for example, a triangle or a rectangle or a square. So looking at the area of the blue turquoise rectangle on the first example, okay, we can see that area is the amount of space inside and the perimeter is the total distance around the outside. So when measuring for perimeter, it can be in different units of length, such as kilometres, metres, centimetres or millimetres. And when we're looking at measuring area, we can count the number of squares to find an area of a rectilinear shape. So for example, the pink squares on the right hand side, 1 square, area is worth 1 square, and the shape underneath it's got 6 squares, so the area is 6 squares. Thank you very much for listening to this training session today. It is a whistle-stop tour of measurements in lower key stage 2. Join us again for the next session where we'll be looking at year 5 and 6, looking at upper key stage 2. Thank you very much. Don't forget to complete the form to show that you've taken part.